My name is Kane, and at 33 years old, I have finally found peace as a successful tattoo artist in Seattle. With my vibrant purple hair, sleeve tattoos, and unconventional fashion sense, I have always been the black sheep in my traditional family. When the wedding invitation from my cousin arrived at every family member's mailbox except mine, I realized some wounds cut deeper than any tattoo needle ever could. Before I share how my family treated me and the most important decision of my life, let me know where you are watching from, and please hit subscribe so you never miss a true story about standing up for yourself. Growing up in a pristine suburban neighborhood outside Boston, my childhood looked picture-perfect from the outside. Our two-story colonial house with its manicured lawn and white picket fence could have been featured in a magazine about the American dream. My father, Richard, worked as a corporate attorney at a prestigious firm, while my mother, Diana, maintained her role as the perfect homemaker. My two older brothers, Thomas and William, followed closely in our father's footsteps with their neatly combed hair-pressed khakis and ambitions to enter respectable professions. Then there was me, Kane, the unexpected addition to the family and the only girl. From the moment I could express preferences, it became clear I was different. While my family dressed in neutral tones and conservative styles, I gravitated toward bright colors and creative patterns. My mother would lay out a sensible navy blue dress for Sunday church, only to find me in my room adding colorful ribbons or attempting to sew on sequins I had secretly collected. "Kane, why can you not just wear what I picked out for you?" My mother would sigh her face, a mixture of confusion and frustration. "Everyone else manages to look appropriate. What will people think of us?" That question became the soundtrack of my childhood. What will people think? In second grade, when asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, I proudly announced I would be an artist. The teacher smiled, but later at the parent-teacher conference, I overheard her telling my parents that perhaps they should guide me toward more practical aspirations. My father nodded seriously, as though they were discussing a serious medical condition rather than a 7-year-old's dream. The divide became more apparent during summer breaks. While Thomas and William attended sports camps and academic programs, I begged to go to art camp. After much debate and my mother's tearful intervention, my father reluctantly agreed on the condition that I also attend math tutoring 3 times a week. Drawing pictures will not get you into Harvard, Kane. He lectured me the night before my first day at art camp. You need to focus on things that matter. But to me, art mattered more than anything. I found joy in creating, in seeing the world differently than my family did. I spent hours in my room drawing elaborate fantasy worlds, painting on any surface I could find, and fashioning jewelry from random objects around the house. My mother alternated between reluctant admiration of my creativity and obvious dismay at my unconventional interests. My brothers mostly ignored my artistic pursuits except when they could use them as ammunition for teasing. "Hey," Space Cadet Thomas would call when he found me lost in sketching. Earth to Weirdo William would chime in, snapping his fingers in front of my face to break my concentration. The first major incident that showed just how much my differences bothered my family occurred when I was 10. The annual Richardson family photo was scheduled, and my mother had purchased matching outfits for everyone, crisp white shirts and navy blue bottoms. The night before, I used fabric markers to add colorful designs to the collar and cuffs of my shirt. I thought it looked beautiful, a personal touch that expressed who I was while still coordinating with the family. The next morning, my mother discovered my creation and burst into tears. My father came running, and upon seeing the ruined shirt, his face turned an alarming shade of red. "What is wrong with you?" he shouted, his voice echoing through our perfect home. "Why must you constantly embarrass this family? Do you enjoy making your mother cry?" I was made to wear one of my mother's white blouses pinned and folded to fit my small frame. In the resulting photo, everyone else smiles confidently while I look like I am drowning in fabric and shame. But the most painful childhood memory, the one that truly showed me where I stood in my family, happened when I was 13. Thomas was turning 18 and heading to Yale in the falling family tradition. My parents planned an elaborate garden party for him, inviting extended family neighbors and important colleagues from my father's firm. The week before the party, I was going through a particularly expressive phase. I had convinced my best friend Lisa to help me dye a streak of pink in my hair using Kool-Aid. I thought it looked amazing and couldn't wait to show everyone. My mother saw it first when I came down for breakfast. Her coffee cup froze midway to her lips and her eyes widened in horror. "Richard," she called, her voice unnaturally calm, "you need to see what your daughter has done." My father's reaction was swift and decisive. "You are not attending your brother's party looking like that. What would our guests think about our family if they saw you with pink hair? Thomas deserves a perfect day without your attention-seeking behavior ruining it." Despite my tears and promises to wash it out, which proved impossible with the Kool-Aid, the decision was final. On the day of the party, I was sent to stay with our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, who spent the afternoon showing me her stamp collection while I fought back tears. Later, I saw the family photos from the event posted all over our house, everyone looking perfect without the strange daughter to disrupt the image. That night, lying in bed and listening to the sounds of the last guests leaving, I made a silent promise to myself. Someday, I would find people who would accept me exactly as I was. Someday, I would create my own definition of family. But that realization came with a price. A piece of my heart hardened that day, creating a protective shell around the part of me that still desperately wanted my family's approval. I began to understand that in my parents' eyes, their image would always matter more than my feelings. It was a harsh lesson for a 13-year-old, but one that would prepare me for what was to come. By 18, the distance between my family and me had grown from a crack to a chasm. While my brothers had followed the expected path to prestigious universities and conventional majors, I stood my ground when it came time for college applications. "I'm applying to art schools," I announced at dinner one night during my senior year of high school. The clatter of silverware against plates fell silent as 3 pairs of eyes stared at me in disbelief. "You most certainly are not," my father responded, his tone leaving no room for discussion. "You will apply to Boston University like we discussed. Their business program is excellent, and you can minor in art if you must." I had anticipated this reaction and came prepared. I have already submitted applications to 5 art schools. I paid the fees with money I earned from selling my paintings online. The explosion that followed was nuclear. My father slammed his fist on the table, causing the water glasses to jump. My mother burst into tears, a response I had come to expect whenever I failed to meet their expectations. Thomas, home from Yale for the weekend, shook his head in disapproval while William stared intently at his plate, avoiding the conflict altogether. "We will not pay a penny for this nonsense," my father declared. "If you insist on throwing away your future on some artistic fantasy, you will do it without our support." To their shock, I nodded calmly. "I have applied for scholarships, and I have been saving money for 3 years." What I did not tell them was that my art teacher, Mrs. Hernandez, had been helping me prepare a portfolio since sophomore year, recognizing a talent my family refused to see. 3 months later, when my acceptance letter from the Seattle Art Institute arrived with a substantial scholarship offer, I made my choice. My parents made one last attempt to change my mind, alternating between guilt trips and thinly veiled threats about my future security. "Artist starve Kane," my mother pleaded. "Is that what you want for yourself, to struggle for the rest of your life?" "I would rather struggle doing something I love than succeed at something that makes me miserable," I replied, surprising myself with my conviction. The day I left for Seattle was filled with strained goodbyes and my mother's tearful warnings. My father drove me to the airport in silence, offering only a stiff hug and a curt "call your mother when you land" before turning away. Seattle was everything Boston was not. Vibrant, expressive, embracing of differences rather than condemning them. For the first time in my life, I found myself surrounded by people who did not question my colorful clothing or artistic aspirations. My roommate Zoe, a photography major with a septum piercing and a shock of blue hair, became my first true friend in this new world. Your family sounds like robots, she commented after I shared stories of home. No offense, but do they even have personalities under all that propriety? I laughed, but her words struck a chord. Had I ever seen my parents or brothers truly express joy, passion, or uninhibited emotion? They existed within such narrow parameters of acceptable behavior that I wondered if they even knew who they were beneath the expectations. In my second year of art school, I discovered tattoo art. What began as an appreciation for the art form evolved into an apprenticeship at a local studio. The day I got my first tattoo, a small bird breaking free from a cage on my wrist, I felt a sense of reclaiming my body and identity. Each subsequent tattoo became another declaration of independence. My rare video calls with family became increasingly uncomfortable. My mother would gasp at each new visible tattoo or hair color change. My father would lecture about professionalism, and my brothers would exchange knowing glances that said, "She is still being difficult." "You will never get a real job looking like that," my father warned during one particularly tense call after I had added a full sleeve of botanical illustrations to my left arm. "I already have a real job," I countered. "The studio hired me full-time. I have health insurance and a 401 Kelvin." "Drawing on people is not a career," he scoffed. "It is a phase and one you will regret when you grow up and want to be taken seriously." Visits home grew fewer and farther between. Each return to Boston felt like stepping back in time where I was expected to shrink myself to fit into the box labeled Richardson family member. I would pack long-sleeved shirts despite the summer heat, remove facial piercings, and dye my hair a more natural color, all in a futile attempt to keep the peace. During one Christmas visit when I was 22, my mother cornered me in the kitchen while I was helping with dinner preparations. "Why do you insist on making yourself so unmarriageable?" she asked in a hushed tone as though my single status at 22 was a family scandal. "No respectable man will want a wife covered in tattoos." "Then I guess I will have to find a man who is not respectable by your standards," I replied, continuing to chop vegetables with perhaps more force than necessary. My relationship with Thomas deteriorated to nearly nothing. As the golden child who had followed the path exactly as laid out for him, he seemed to take my divergence as a personal affront. He worked at our father's law firm, now lived in a Boston suburb eerily similar to the one we grew up in, and was engaged to Catherine, a woman who could have been custom-ordered from a catalog titled Appropriate Spouses for Successful Attorneys. William, my middle brother, maintained a somewhat neutral stance. While clearly committed to the family, approved lifestyle, working as a financial analyst, and dating a series of suitable women, he occasionally showed moments of genuine interest in my life. "Your Instagram posts are actually pretty cool," he admitted during one visit when we found ourselves alone in the family room. "That tattoo you did of the Japanese wave was impressive. It was not much, but in the desert of family approval, even this small acknowledgement felt like a rainstorm." Still, these moments were rare, and with each passing year, I felt myself becoming more of a stranger to the people who shared my DNA. Seattle became my true home. I built a community of friends who celebrated rather than tolerated my differences. My career as a tattoo artist flourished as I developed a distinctive style that attracted clients from across the Pacific Northwest. I dated people who saw my appearance as an expression of my creativity rather than a character flaw. Yet, despite the fulfilling life, I was building a small part of me still ashti for acceptance from the people who had known me first. Every achievement, every moment of happiness was tinged with the knowledge that those who should have been proudest would instead view my success as something to hide from their country club friends. I was building a life they could never understand, and the realization was both liberating and profoundly sad. The first wedding invitation arrived when I was 24. Thomas was marrying Catherine, and the thick cream envelope with gold embossing screamed traditional elegance. Inside, beneath the formal invitation, was a handwritten note from my mother. "Kane, we are so looking forward to having the whole family together for this special occasion. I have taken the liberty of reserving you an appointment at my salon for the day before. They can help you with a nice natural hair color." Also, Catherine has requested that all female guests wear dresses in pastel colors. Long sleeves would be best for you, dear. Given your situation, we want the focus to be on the bride and groom, not on distracting elements. My situation. As if my tattoos were a medical condition to be discreetly covered rather than art, I had chosen for my body. I called my mother that evening, trying to keep my voice level. Mom, I understand this is an important day for Thomas, and I want to be respectful. I can wear a dress with longer sleeves, but I am not changing my hair color. The silence on the other end of the line stretched until I checked to see if the call had dropped. Your brother and Catherine have been very specific about the aesthetic they want for their wedding, she finally replied. Everyone is making an effort to comply with their wishes. It would be selfish of you to prioritize your personal expression over their special day. The guilt trip was familiar territory, but the implications stung nonetheless. Being myself was apparently an act of selfishness that would ruin my brother's wedding. After days of internal debate and several tearful conversations with my Seattle friends, I decided to compromise. I purchased an elegant lavender dress with 3 ardor sleeves that covered most of my tattoos, bought temporary makeup specifically designed to cover the visible ones on my lower arms. And while I did not dye my hair back to brown as requested, I styled it in a more subdued way. The weekend of the wedding, I flew to Boston with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. The rehearsal dinner set the tone for what was to come. I was seated at a table with distant cousins and Catherine's former college roommates' parents rather than with immediate family. My mother introduced me to various guests with qualifiers. This is our daughter, Kane. She is visiting from Seattle, carefully avoiding any mention of my profession or life. The wedding day itself was a masterclass in subtle exclusion. When family photos were being taken, I was included in only the largest group shots. For the more intimate family portraits, the photographer mysteriously needed to change lenses or adjust lighting whenever it would have been my turn. During the reception, I overheard Catherine's mother speaking to another guest. Yes, that is Richard and Diana's daughter. Such a shame what she has done to herself. They try not to talk about her much. I spent most of the reception nursing a glass of champagne in a corner, watching my family play their parts in this performance of perfect conventional happiness. Not once did Thomas seek me out to thank me for coming or to introduce me to his new wife's family. My father danced with the bride, my mother cried appropriate tears, and William delivered a best man speech full of inside jokes and references to the proper upbringing they had shared. I left early, slipping away without goodbyes. No one noticed. 3 months later, my cousin Jennifer, who had been my closest childhood friend, got engaged. We had spent countless summers together as children, sharing secrets and dreams. Before my move to Seattle, we had promised to be in each other's weddings someday. I learned about her engagement through my mother's weekly phone call, during which she casually mentioned that Jennifer had asked my cousins Heather and Sarah to be bridesmaids. What about me? I asked, a childish hope rising despite years of evidence that should have quashed it. Oh, Kane, my mother sighed. You know how traditional Uncle Robert and Aunt Nancy are. Jennifer is having a church wedding, and they have certain expectations for the bridal party. I am sure you understand. I did understand. I understood perfectly. The invitation when it arrived specified that I could bring a +1, but please discuss appropriate attire with your mother beforehand. I declined the invitation, sending an expensive item from the registry with a heartfelt note congratulating Jennifer. She never responded. The pattern continued. Family weddings became exercises in exclusion, each invitation more conditional than the last. For my cousin Mark's wedding, I was invited to the ceremony, but not the reception. For my aunt's second marriage, the invitation arrived a mere week before the event. Clearly an afterthought. Then came William's engagement to Elizabeth, a pediatrician from a family remarkably similar to ours. I learned about it through social media rather than from my brother directly. When I called to congratulate him, his response was lukewarm at best. Thanks, Kane. Listen about the wedding. We are keeping it small and intimate. Of course, I replied, already knowing what was coming. Just family and close friends. Right, he said, relief evident in his voice. And Elizabeth's family is very traditional. Catholic church ceremony, formal reception at the country club, that sort of thing. The unspoken message was clear. There was no place for someone like me in that sort of thing. The formal invitation arrived 2 weeks after most guests had already received theirs, according to my mother's inadvertent slip during a phone call. This time, the note attached was even more explicit. Kane, we would love to have you join us for our special day. Please note that the country club has a strict dress code. No visible tattoos, conventional hair colors only, and formal attire is required. If you wish to bring a guest, please ensure they also adhere to these guidelines. I stared at the note, reading between the lines. If your boyfriend has tattoos or piercings, leave him at home. If you cannot erase all evidence of your true self, do not come. For days, I debated with myself. William had at least made some efforts to maintain a relationship with me over the years. Was it worth another round of awkward stares and whispered comments to support him? Would my presence even be welcome or merely tolerated as a familial obligation? My decision was made for me when my Aunt Carol called ostensibly to catch up, but really to do reconnaissance. Your mother mentioned you might be bringing someone to William's wedding, she probed. What does he do for a living? His name is Javier, I answered. He is a sculptor and installation artist. We have been together for almost a year. A sculptor? She repeated as though I had said he was a professional bank robber. And does he also have those drawings all over his skin like you do? They are called tattoos, Aunt Carol. And yes, Javier has several beautiful pieces, including some I designed for him. The disapproving click of her tongue was audible through the phone. Well, I am not sure that will work with the venue William and Elizabeth have chosen. Very exclusive place. They have standards to maintain. 2 days later, William called Kane about the wedding. Elizabeth and I have been talking, and we think it might be best if you came alone. Her parents are contributing significantly to the wedding, and they are very particular about the guest list. Particular in what way? I challenged my patience, finally wearing thin. You know what I mean? He mumbled. They want everything to be perfect. And someone like Javier would ruin the perfection I finished for him. Someone like me ruins the perfection too, William. But you are stuck with me as a sister, so you have to send the obligatory invitation. That is not what I meant, he protested weakly. It is exactly what you meant, I replied. Send my regrets to Elizabeth. I will not be attending. I did not send a gift. The final straw came later that year, when I discovered through Facebook that my cousin Amber was getting married. We had never been particularly close, but every other family member had received invitations months ago. My mother, when confronted, admitted the truth. Amber admires you, Kane. She always has. Her parents were concerned that if you attended, you might influence her younger sister, Lily. She is at an impressionable age, you see, and has already been asking about getting a tattoo. They just think it would be better if certain influences were kept away right now. I was 30 years old, a successful business owner, a homeowner in a stable relationship, and yet, in my family's eyes, I was a corrupting influence to be kept away from impressionable teenagers. Something inside me broke that day. The last thread of hope that someday they might see me as I truly was, instead of as the disappointment I represented to them. I understand completely. I told my mother, my voice oddly calm. Please let everyone know they do not need to worry about sending me invitations to future family events. I will not be attending. Kane, do not be dramatic, she scolded. Family is family. Is it? I asked. Because from where I stand, family are the people who love you without conditions, who celebrate your happiness instead of being embarrassed by it. I have not had that kind of family since I was born. I hung up and blocked every family member's number from my phone. The time for compromise was over. With the weight of family expectations finally cast aside, I threw myself fully into building a life that brought me joy. My reputation as a tattoo artist continued to grow, and at 29, I had saved enough to become a partner at Inc. Alchemy, one of Seattle's most prestigious studios. My work was featured in tattoo magazines, and clients sometimes waited months for appointments. My circle of friends expanded a chosen family of creative, accepting people who celebrated each other's differences rather than trying to sand them down to uniformity. We gathered for holidays, birthdays, and random Tuesday nights, creating our own traditions, unburdened by judgment or pretense. Zoe, my college roommate turned best friend, had opened a photography studio specializing in portraits that celebrated unconventional beauty. "Normal is boring," was her business motto, and her waiting list was months long. "You should let me photograph you for my new gallery show," she suggested one afternoon as we shared lunch in her studio. "The theme is reclamation, all about people who have taken ownership of their bodies and identities." "I am not a model," I protested. "You are a walking work of art," she countered. "Your body tells your story. Let me help you share it." The resulting photograph became the centerpiece of her exhibition. In it, I stood with my back partially to the camera, looking over my shoulder. My tattoos were fully visible, including the newest one across my shoulders. "I am my own masterpiece," written in elegant script. It was at this exhibition that I met Ethan. Tall, with kind eyes and a quiet confidence. He stood studying my portrait for so long that I finally approached him. "If you stare any longer, I might have to charge admission," I joked. He turned surprised, then smiled when he realized who I was. "I was trying to read all the stories in your tattoos," he explained. "Each one seems like a chapter in a book I would very much like to read." Unlike the men my mother thought I should date, Ethan did not have a conventional career path. A photojournalist who specialized in documenting subcultures and marginalized communities, he had traveled extensively before settling in Seattle 2 years earlier. His arms bore his own collection of tattoos, each one acquired during his travels and representing different chapters of his journey. Our first date lasted 6 hours, beginning with coffee and ending with stargazing from Cary Park overlooking the Seattle skyline. He listened more than he spoke, asked questions that showed genuine interest rather than judgment. And when he finally kissed me goodnight, it felt like coming home to a place I had never been before. My parents would have a heart attack if they could see us now. I said one evening, 3 months into our relationship. We were sprawled on his apartment floor, surrounded by takeout containers and art supplies, working on a collaborative piece for a charity auction. "Because we are eating pad thai on the floor like heathens?" he asked with a grin. "Because you have tattoos and a beard and live in an apartment filled with strange artifacts from around the world instead of Pottery Barn furniture," I explained. "And because I am happier with you than I ever was trying to be what they wanted." He set down his paintbrush and looked at me seriously. "Tell me about them. Your family. You always deflect when they come up." For the first time, I shared the full story of my childhood and the years of exclusion and conditional acceptance. Ethan listened without interrupting his expression, growing increasingly troubled. "They never deserved you," he said. Said when I finished. "Families are supposed to protect your flame, not try to extinguish it." "Is that what yours did?" I asked, realizing I knew little about his background. His laugh held no humor. "My father left when I was 4. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. She died when I was in college lung cancer from years of smoking to cope with stress. But she came to every art show, proudly told her coworkers about my photography. And when I got my first tattoo at 18, she asked for a temporary version so she could match me for a day." Tears filled my eyes at the thought of such unconditional love. "She sounds amazing." "She would have adored you," he said simply. "She believed that the people who mind do not matter, and the people who matter do not mind." As our relationship deepened, I found myself building connections with Ethan's friends as well. His circle included documentary filmmakers, musicians, community activists, and other photographers, all of whom welcomed me with genuine warmth. Sunday dinners at his friend Miguel's restaurant became a weekly tradition. The large table filled with laughter, passionate debates, and people who saw each other clearly. For my 31st birthday, Ethan organized a surprise party at our favorite rooftop bar. Surrounded by friends who had become family with the Seattle skyline glittering below us, I felt a contentment I had never known in the sterile perfection of my childhood home. Later that night, as we walked along the waterfront, Ethan suddenly stopped and turned to me. "I had a whole speech planned," he said, looking uncharacteristically nervous, "about how you deserve someone who loves every colorful, creative inch of you, about how I want to build a life where we both get to be exactly who we are." My heart began racing as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. "But looking at you now under these stars, all I can think to say is that I love you, Kane Richardson. I love your strength, your creativity, your compassion, and your courage to be yourself no matter what. Will you marry me?" He opened the box to reveal a ring unlike any I had seen before. Instead of a traditional diamond, it featured a mosaic of small colored stones arranged in a pattern that echoed the design of my first major tattoo. "You had this custom made?" I whispered, overwhelmed. "Of course I did," he replied. "Nothing off the shelf could possibly capture who you are." "Yes," I said through tears of joy. "Yes, I will marry you." As we celebrated with champagne back at his apartment, a sobering thought cut through my happiness. "My family," I began, then faltered. Ethan took my hand. "Whatever you decide about involving them, I will support you. They can be as included or excluded as you want them to be." I nodded, grateful for his understanding, but uncertain of what I wanted. Despite everything, some small part of me still hoped for reconciliation, for the family approval I had been seeking my entire life. After a week of deliberation, I sent a simple email to my parents. "I wanted to let you know that I am engaged to be married to Ethan Walker, a photojournalist I have been dating for the past year. We have not set a date yet, but will likely have a small ceremony in Seattle next spring. I hope you can be happy for me, Kane." The response when it came 3 days later was exactly what I should have expected, but still managed to disappoint. "Congratulations on your engagement. Your father and I would very much like to meet Ethan before the wedding. Perhaps you could both visit Boston during the holidays so we can get to know him. Love, Mom." No excitement, no questions about the proposal or the ring or our plans, just the clear implication that Ethan needed to be vetted and approved before they could properly acknowledge our engagement. I showed the email to Ethan, who read it with a raised eyebrow. Translation: "We need to inspect this man to see if he can still be molded into something we find acceptable." That is exactly what it means. I agreed to wait, settling in my chest. They will hate your tattoos, question your career, and probably ask about your investment portfolio within the first 10 minutes. "Let them," he said, pulling me close. "Their approval is not required for our happiness." In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done trying to contort myself into shapes that would please people who had never tried to understand me. Done seeking approval from those who saw my differences as flaws rather than features. If my family could not celebrate who I truly was on the most important day of my life, they did not deserve to be present for it. "I do not want them at our wedding," I said quietly. "Any of them." Ethan studied my face carefully. "Are you sure this is not a decision to make in anger?" "I am not angry," I realized with surprise. "I am just finally accepting the truth I have known for years. They do not want me. They want the daughter they think I should have been." He nodded slowly. "Then we will create a wedding filled only with people who love us exactly as we are." That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in years. The burden of seeking family approval finally lifted from my shoulders. The decision to exclude my family from our wedding brought an unexpected sense of freedom. Without the pressure to create an event that would meet their standards of propriety, Ethan and I were free to design a celebration that truly reflected who we were as individuals and as a couple. We rented an industrial art space in downtown Seattle, a former warehouse with exposed brick walls, soaring ceilings, and massive windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Instead of traditional floral arrangements, we commissioned local artists, many of them friends, to create installations throughout the space. Our save the dates were handmade letterpress cards featuring an illustration Ethan and I had designed together. As I compiled our guest list, the absence of family names was both liberating and painful. No parents, no brothers, no aunts or uncles or cousins, just friends who had shown up for us consistently, who had created space for us to be our authentic selves. "Are you sure about this?" Zoe asked when I showed her the final list. Not even William. He seemed less judgmental than the rest. "If I invite one, I have to invite them all," I explained. "And I cannot spend my wedding day worrying about disapproving looks or underhanded comments about my dress or our vows or anything else." I had chosen a wedding dress that would have given my mother palpitations of vintage-inspired cream silk with an open back that displayed the intricate botanical tattoos covering my spine. Instead of a veil, I would wear a crown of preserved wildflowers that matched the colors in my currently teal and purple hair. The phone call from my mother came exactly 3 weeks after we sent our save the dates to everyone except my family. "Kane," she began without preamble when I answered. "Aunt Carol just called me. She ran into Miguel's mother at a charity function in San Francisco, and she was talking about the beautiful save the date card she received for your wedding in June." I closed my eyes, cursing the coincidence. Miguel's mother occasionally visited from California and must have mentioned our upcoming wedding without realizing the situation with my family. "Yes, Ethan and I are getting married in June," I confirmed, keeping my voice neutral. "Why did we not receive an invitation?" She demanded, her tone shifting from confusion to indignation. "Please tell me this is just an oversight with the mail." I took a deep breath. "It was not an oversight, Mom. We decided to keep our wedding small with just close friends." The silence that followed was deafening. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled with barely controlled emotion. "Just friends, no family at all, Kane. This is beyond your usual rebellion. This is cruel." "Is it cruel?" I asked quietly. "Was it cruel when Thomas and Catherine seated me at the back table with strangers at their wedding? Was it cruel when Jennifer did not ask me to be a bridesmaid after we had promised each other since childhood? Was it cruel when William suggested I come to his wedding alone because my boyfriend's tattoos might offend Elizabeth's parents?" "Those were different circumstances," she protested weakly. "No, they were not. They were all the same circumstance. My family being ashamed of who I am. I will not have that energy at my wedding. I want to be surrounded by people who love Ethan and me for exactly who we are, not despite it." "Your father will be devastated," she said, resorting to her usual tactic of emotional manipulation. "He has always imagined walking his only daughter down the aisle. Has he?" I countered, "because he has spent most of my life making it clear that I am a disappointment to him. The only version of me he wants to walk down the aisle is one that does not exist." The conversation ended with my mother in tears and my resolve stronger than ever. Later that evening, William texted me for the first time in months. "Mom told me about the wedding. I get why you are upset with the family, but I thought you and I were okay. Would have liked to be there for your big day." I stared at the message for a long time, remembering the rare moments of connection we had shared over the years. William had never been as openly disapproving as Thomas or my father, but he had also never stood up for me, never challenged the family's treatment of me. "It was not an easy decision," I replied honestly, "but I need to protect my peace on this day." No divided loyalties, no walking on eggshells, no worrying about who might say what. I hope you can understand. His response was brief but surprisingly thoughtful. "I do not agree, but I respect that it is your choice to make. I hope your day is everything you want it to be." As word spread through the family grapevine, the pressure mounted. Extended family members I barely spoke to sent messages expressing their disappointment in my decision. My father predictably did not contact me directly, but apparently told my uncle that I was breaking your mother's heart with this childish stunt. Through it all, Ethan remained my steadfast support. "They are trying to make this about them," he observed. After I received a particularly guilt-laden email from an aunt. But this day is about us and the life we are choosing to build together. 2 weeks before the wedding, I sat down and wrote individual letters to my parents and brothers. Not invitations, but explanations. I poured out years of hurt, disappointment, and rejection, detailing specific instances when their conditional acceptance had damaged me. I explained that my wedding day needed to be a space free from judgment, a celebration of love that accepted rather than criticized. I do love you, I wrote to each of them, but I have spent my entire life trying to earn your love in return, always falling short because I could not be someone other than who I am. For this one day, I need to be surrounded only by people who have never asked me to be less in order to be loved. I sent the letters via registered mail requiring signatures so I would know they had been received. None of them responded. Our wedding day dawned bright and clear, the Seattle skyline crisp against a rare cloudless sky. As Zoe helped me into my dress and arranged my flower crown, I felt a momentary pang of sadness at the absence of my mother. In another life, in another family, she would have been here perhaps crying happy tears and telling me how beautiful I looked. "You okay?" Zoe asked, catching my expression in the mirror. "Just a moment of what might have been?" I admitted it is passing. The ceremony space took my breath away when I entered. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the gathered faces of the people who had chosen to love us. Miguel stood ready to officiate, having gotten ordained online specifically for our wedding. Ethan waited at the front, his smile so full of love that any lingering sadness evaporated. I walked down the aisle alone, not given away, but arriving of my own accord to join my partner in creating a new family built on acceptance rather than expectation. Our vows, written together over late-night cups of tea, promised to nurture each other's authentic selves, to create a home where differences were celebrated rather than merely tolerated. "I choose you, Ethan," said his voice steady and sure. "Not a version of you that fits some predetermined mold, but exactly as you are in this moment and all the versions of yourself you will become. I choose you." I echoed and promised to create with you a family defined by love, without conditions, acceptance without reservation, and joy without restraint. The reception that followed was everything a family celebration should be. Laughter, tears of joy, spontaneous dancing, heartfelt toasts, and the overwhelming sense of being truly seen and loved. As I looked around at the gathered faces, I realized that family had nothing to do with DNA, and everything to do with choice. That night, as Ethan and I swayed to our last dance beneath strings of twinkling lights, he whispered in my ear, "Any regrets?" I thought about the empty chairs where my parents might have sat, the dances not shared with my father and brothers, the family photos not taken. Then I looked into the eyes of the man who loved me completely, surrounded by friends who had become family. "Not a single one," I answered truthfully. "Today was perfect because everyone here wants us to be exactly who we are." We left the next morning for our honeymoon, a exploration of small art communities along the Pacific coast. My new name, Kane Walker. Feeling like both a fresh start and the most authentic version of myself I had ever been. Our honeymoon was a blissful escape from reality, a bubble of perfect happiness as we explored coastal art colonies, tiny galleries, and beaches where we collected sea lass at sunset. For 2 weeks, I did not check email or social media, choosing instead to be fully present in this new beginning with my husband. The return to normal life came too quickly. We arrived home late on a Sunday evening, tired but happy. Our apartment filled with wedding gifts we had yet to open and thank you notes waiting to be written. Monday morning brought a return to work and the ordinary rhythms of daily life, now sweetened by our new status as husband and wife. 3 days after our return, the doorbell rang at 7:30 in the evening. Ethan and I were in the kitchen making dinner together, a post-honeymoon meal of homemade pasta and wine we had discovered on our travels. "Probably a package delivery," I said, wiping my hands on a towel as I went to answer. When I opened the door, the pasta fork I was still holding clattered to the floor. Standing in the hallway of our apartment building were my parents, Thomas, and his wife, Catherine and William. 5 pairs of eyes stared at me with expressions ranging from determination to discomfort. "Surprise," my mother said with a brittle smile. "We thought it was time for a family visit." I stood frozen in shock, unable to form words or decide whether to close the door or invite them in. Ethan appeared behind me, his hand coming to rest supportively on my lower back. "Kane," he questioned quietly. "Everything okay? My family is here." I managed my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Apparently, to his credit, Ethan recovered from his surprise quickly. "Would you like to come in?" he offered. When I remained speechless, we were just making dinner. They filed into our apartment, my mother looking around with barely concealed judgment at the eclectic decor, the gallery wall of artwork by friends, the visible evidence of lives not confined by convention. My father stood stiffly just inside the door, as though afraid to commit to being fully present. Thomas and Catherine positioned themselves near him, a united front of disapproval, while William wandered toward our bookshelf, seemingly more curious than condemning. "This is certainly creative," my mother commented, gesturing vaguely at our living space. "Very artistic." "Thank you," Ethan replied pleasantly, though I could feel the tension in his body. "Can I offer anyone a drink?" "We have wine open." "Water would be fine," my father finally spoke. "We do not plan to stay long." The atmosphere was so thick with unspoken words that it felt difficult to breathe. Ethan retreated to the kitchen to fetch water, leaving me alone with my family for the first time in years. "What are you doing here?" I finally asked, finding my voice. "How did you even know where I live?" "William found your address," my mother explained, as though this was a perfectly normal way to arrive unannounced in a city 2,000 mi from home. "We needed to speak with you in person about," I prompted, though I already knew the answer. My father stepped forward, his attorney persona fully engaged about this wedding stunt of yours. "Do you have any idea how humiliating it has been for this family? Relatives and friends asking why we were not at our own daughter's wedding, having to make excuses because our child decided to throw a tantrum like a teenager." "Richard," my mother cautioned, placing a restraining hand on his arm. "We agreed to stay calm." "I am perfectly calm," he snapped, though his wreathing face suggested otherwise. "But I will not pretend this behavior is anything but deliberately hurtful and childish." Ethan returned with a tray of water glasses, his expression carefully neutral. "Perhaps we should all sit down," he suggested, gesturing toward our living room seating area. No one moved. "You did not even give us a chance," my mother said, her voice breaking. "To not have my only daughter want me at her wedding." "Do you know how that feels, Kane? After everything we have done for you, after everything you have done to me," I corrected quietly. "And yes, I do know exactly how it feels to be excluded from important family events. I have known that feeling my entire adult life." "That is completely different," Thomas interjected. "When we made certain requests for our weddings, it was about maintaining a certain standard and respecting traditions. You chose to deliberately hurt the entire family out of spite. Maintaining a certain standard." I repeated. "You mean hiding me away because my appearance embarrassed you? Seating me at the back of the room with strangers, excluding me from family photos, making me feel like my presence was barely tolerated rather than welcomed." "You are exaggerating," my father dismissed. "You have always had a flair for the dramatic." Something inside me snapped. Years of suppressed hurt and anger bubbled to the surface. Am I exaggerating about Jennifer not asking me to be a bridesmaid because her parents thought I looked too alternative? Am I exaggerating about William suggesting I leave my boyfriend at home because his tattoos might offend Elizabeth's family? Am I exaggerating about not being invited to Amber's wedding because her parents thought I might be a bad influence? My voice had risen with each example, and I was now standing with my fists clenched at my sides. "You all made it abundantly clear that I was only welcome at family events if I hid who I really am. So tell me, Why would I want any of you at the most important day of my life to hear more whispers about my appearance? To be told my husband is not good enough because he does not have the right job or the right background. We just wanted what was best for you, my mother cried, tears now streaming down her face. We wanted you to have the best opportunities, the best life possible. No, I countered. You wanted me to have the life you thought was best. There is a difference. William, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. I think Kane has a point, he said quietly. We have not always been fair to her. Thomas shot him a look of betrayal. Do not encourage this behavior, Will. She deliberately excluded her entire family from her wedding. There is no justification for that level of disrespect. Respect goes both ways. Ethan spoke up, his voice, firm but controlled. From what Kane has told me and from what I am witnessing right now, respect for her choices has been in short supply from this family. My father turned his cold gaze to Ethan. I do not believe anyone asked for your opinion, young man. This is a family matter. He is my husband, I said, moving to stand beside Ethan. That makes him family. More family than any of you have been to me in years. The tension in the room reached a breaking point. My mother began sobbing in earnest. My father's face turned an alarming shade of red, and Thomas looked like he wanted to punch something, preferably Ethan. I think what your family is trying to express, Catherine ventured, speaking for the first time, is that they feel hurt and excluded from an important milestone? Perhaps if you had communicated your feelings before the wedding, a compromise could have been reached. I turned to her, incredulous. A compromise like the one where I was seated with strangers at your wedding, or the one where I was asked to change my hair color and cover my tattoos to avoid embarrassing everyone. Those kinds of compromises. You see how impossible she is, Thomas said to Ethan, as though they were co-conspirators in dealing with a difficult child. It has always been her way or no way at all. That is rich coming from you. I laughed without humor. When have any of you ever compromised with me? When have you ever accepted me for who I am instead of who you wanted me to be? The situation deteriorated rapidly from there. My father began listing all the ways I had disappointed the family over the years. From my choice of college to my career to my appearance, my mother alternated between tears and pleas for reconciliation on their terms. Thomas continued to portray me as selfish and ungrateful. Through it all, Ethan remained steadfastly by my side, his hand in mine, a physical reminder that I was no longer alone against them. The climax came when my mother, in a moment of raw honesty, perhaps brought on by frustration, blurted out, "Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is to have a daughter who looks like you do? To have to explain to our friends why our only daughter has tattoos and odd-colored hair and dresses like she is in a circus. We have always been ashamed to introduce you to anyone in our social circle." The room went silent. The admission hung in the air. The truth finally spoken aloud after years of being carefully dressed in more acceptable language. I felt strangely calm in the face of this confirmation of what I had always known. Thank you for your honesty, Mom. At least now we all know exactly where we stand. Diana, for God's sake, my father hissed. But the damage was done. I think it is time for you all to leave, Ethan said, his voice gentle, but leaving no room for argument. Kane and I were in the middle of dinner, and this conversation is clearly not productive for anyone. We are not finished, my father insisted. We came here for an apology and an explanation. And you got an explanation, I replied. As for an apology, I am sorry that you feel entitled to dictate how I live my life and who I include in it. I am sorry that you cannot see that your conditional love has been the problem all along. But mostly, I am sorry that you never took the time to know who I really am, because you might have actually liked that person if you had given her a chance. I moved toward the door and opened it, a clear invitation for them to exit. I do not need your approval anymore. I have built a life filled with people who love me without conditions, who celebrate my differences instead of being ashamed of them. I have a husband who has never once asked me to be less so that he could love me more. That is what family should be. My father's face hardened. If this is your choice, do not expect anything from us in the future. No support, no inheritance, nothing. I have never expected anything from you, I said truthfully. And I have been taking care of myself for a long time now. They filed out one by one. My mother paused at the door, her hand reaching toward me before dropping back to her side. "This is not what I wanted," she whispered. "I know," I replied. "But this is what you created." The door closed behind them, and the apartment suddenly felt too quiet, as though all the oxygen had been sucked out with their departure. My legs gave way, and I sank to the floor, the full impact of what had just happened hitting me all at once. Ethan knelt beside me, gathering me into his arms as the tears finally came, great, heaving sobs that seemed to emerge from the deepest part of me. He held me without speaking, just a steady presence as I released years of pain and disappointment. Later that night, wrapped in a blanket on our couch with a cup of tea Ethan had made, I received a text from William. "I am sorry about tonight. They should not have ambushed you like that. For what it is worth, your wedding photos on Instagram looked beautiful. You looked happy." It was a small olive branch, but in that moment, it meant everything. "What do we do now?" I asked Ethan as he sat beside me, his arm around my shoulders. "We continue building our life," he answered simply. "On our terms with our chosen family, and we leave the door open just enough that if any of them ever truly wants to know you, the real you, they can find their way in." I nodded, resting my head against his shoulder. "I am not holding my breath." "Probably wise," he agreed. "But either way, you are not alone anymore. You have me and Zoe and Miguel and all the others who love the authentic Kane Walker." For the first time since opening our door to find my family standing there, I smiled. That is more than enough. The months following the confrontation with my family were a time of processing and healing. The raw wound of their visit gradually scabbed over, though I knew the scar would always remain. Ethan suggested I consider therapy to help navigate the complex emotions surrounding my family relationships. And after some initial resistance, I agreed. Dr. Lewis, a compassionate woman with silver stray hair and a quiet wisdom about her, created a safe space for me to unpack 32 years of trying to earn conditional love. "What you experienced was a form of emotional neglect," she explained during one particularly difficult session. "Your parents failed to see and accept the authentic you. Instead, trying to mold you into their idealized version of a daughter that creates a profound sense of invisibility. I always felt like they would love me if only I could be different," I admitted. "Less colorful, less artistic, less me." "And now," she prompted. I considered the question carefully. Now I understand that the problem was never me. I could have erased every tattoo, dyed my hair brown, and worn nothing but beige for the rest of my life, and it still would not have been enough. Because the issue was never my appearance. It was my refusal to conform in all the ways that mattered to them. With Dr. Lewis's guidance, I began to establish healthier boundaries and expectations regarding my family. I unblocked their numbers, but set strict limits on when and how I would engage with them. Any conversation that veered into criticism or judgment would end immediately. It was not reconciliation, but it was a framework that protected my hard-won peace. William was the first to reach out in a meaningful way. 3 months after the confrontation, he asked if we could meet for coffee during a business trip to Seattle. Ethan offered to come with me, but I decided to go alone. We met at a small cafe near my studio, the awkwardness between us palpable as we exchanged stilted greetings. "You look well," he offered as we sat with our drinks. "The married life seems to agree with you." "It does," I confirmed. "Ethan is wonderful. How are things with Elizabeth?" He nodded. "Good. She is pregnant, actually due in February." "Congratulations," I said sincerely. "You will be a great father, Will." He stared into his coffee for a long moment before meeting my eyes. "I have been thinking a lot about what kind of father I want to be. The kind who makes his child feel accepted and loved for exactly who they are, or the kind who has a predetermined idea of who they should become." The implication hung between us, a tacit acknowledgement of our parents' failures. "I am sorry, Kane," he continued, his voice low and serious, "for not standing up for you more over the years, for going along with the family narrative that you were the problem, the difficult one. I knew it was wrong, but it was easier to comply than to challenge them." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, not ready to accept an apology that had taken decades to materialize. He sighed heavily. "Because I do not want my child to ever feel the way you were made to feel. And because seeing you at your apartment that night standing your ground with such dignity despite everyone attacking you, it made me realize how strong you have had to be, stronger than any of us." It was not full reconciliation, but it was a start. We agreed to try building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than shared DNA. William promised to visit Seattle again with Elizabeth to get to know Ethan properly and to make a genuine effort to understand my world instead of judging it. My relationship with the rest of my family remained strained. My mother occasionally sent text messages about inconsequential things, carefully avoiding any mention of our last encounter or the underlying issues. My father did not contact me directly at all, though I heard through William that he had suffered a minor heart attack, which had perhaps softened some of his harder edges. Thomas remained entrenched in his position that I had wronged the family, not the other way around. Through William, I learned that he and Catherine were raising their two young children in an environment eerily similar to our own childhood, complete with rigid expectations and an emphasis on appearances. As for extended family, most maintained a polite distance, though a few reached out after seeing photos of my wedding on social media, expressing admiration for the unique celebration and in some cases regret at having judged me so harshly over the years. Meanwhile, my career continued to flourish. 6 months after our wedding, I took the biggest professional risk of my life, opening my own tattoo studio called Authentic Ink. Unlike the masculine, sometimes intimidating atmosphere of many tattoo shops, I created a warm, inclusive space specifically designed to welcome clients who might feel out of place in traditional studios. Tattoos are about self-expression and reclaiming your body as your own, I explained in an interview with a local arts magazine. Everyone deserves to feel safe and respected in that process, especially people who have been made to feel they do not belong in conventional spaces. The studio quickly gained a reputation as a haven for first-time tattoo clients, members of the LGBTQ+ community, and people with body image struggles. I hired artists with diverse backgrounds and styles, creating an environment where differences were not merely tolerated, but celebrated as strengths. Ethan's career as a photojournalist also took an exciting turn when he received a grant to document alternative communities across America, exploring how people find belonging outside traditional social structures. The project would require periodic travel, but we were secure enough in our relationship to weather the separations. "I think my experiences with your family helped inspire this project," he admitted as we celebrated his grant approval. Seeing how much pain comes from trying to force people into narrow definitions of acceptability made me want to showcase the beauty of those who refuse to be confined. Our home life settled into a rhythm of creative chaos and deep contentment. We converted our spare bedroom into a shared studio space where I could sketch tattoo designs and Ethan could edit photographs. Sunday dinners with our chosen family remained sacred. The table always open to newcomers who needed community. The most surprising development came a year after our wedding when Ethan and I began discussing adoption. The idea of creating a family where a child would be unconditionally loved and accepted for whoever they turned out to be felt like healing a wound that had been open for most of my life. "Are you sure you are ready?" Ethan asked as we completed our initial application for the adoption agency. "Your own family experience is still pretty raw. That is exactly why I am ready." I explained. "I know precisely what a child needs because I know what I never received. Unconditional love is not that complicated, really. It just means saying, 'I see you, I hear you, and I love you exactly as you are.'" As we navigated the complex process of becoming approved adoptive parents, I found myself reflecting often on the nature of family and belonging. Dr. Lewis encouraged me to journal about these reflections, a practice that proved surprisingly cathartic. Family is not about shared DNA, I wrote one evening. It is about shared respect. It is about creating space for each person to grow into their authentic self without fear of rejection. It is about celebrating differences rather than merely tolerating them. The ultimate test of my healing process came unexpectedly, 18 months after our wedding. An envelope arrived containing an invitation to my cousin Sarah's wedding addressed to both Ethan and me with no conditions or dress code stipulations attached. A handwritten note was enclosed. Kane, I always admired your courage to be yourself, even when I was too afraid to say so. Ethan seems wonderful from what William has told us. It would mean so much to have you both at my wedding exactly as you are. Love, Sarah. Ethan found me staring at the invitation, tears streaming down my face. Bad news? He asked, immediately concerned. Actually, I think it might be good news, I replied, showing him the note. The question is, do I want to go? Do I trust that this is genuine and not another opportunity to be judged? We discussed it extensively that evening, weighing the potential for further hurt against the possibility of beginning to heal some family wounds. In the end, the decision came down to one simple truth. I was no longer the same person who had been so devastated by family rejection. I was stronger now, secure in my identity and surrounded by genuine love. I think we should go. I finally decided not to seek approval or to make peace with the past, but to show up authentically in the present, to give Sarah the gift of our presence on her special day without expecting anything in return. The wedding was still 3 months away as I wrote this final journal entry, but the decision itself felt like crossing an important threshold. I was choosing to engage with my family from a place of strength rather than need of confidence, rather than insecurity. Life had taught me the most valuable lesson. Accepting myself was infinitely more important than being accepted by others. True love, whether from family, friends, or partners, never required shrinking or changing or apologizing for who you fundamentally were. And those who could not offer that kind of love were not owed a place in your life, no matter what titles or genetic connections they might claim. I closed my journal and looked around our apartment at the evidence of the beautiful life Ethan and I were building together. The framed wedding photos showing us surrounded by people whose eyes reflected genuine joy. The adoption paperwork spread across our dining table representing the family we hope to create. The walls adorned with art created by friends who saw and celebrated our authentic selves. I have learned that self-acceptance is more important than external validation, I whispered to myself. And that real family are the people who love you for who you are, not for who they want you to become. Sometimes standing alone requires more courage than blending into the crowd. But only when you dare to be yourself do you find the people who truly belong in your life. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between being true to yourself and pleasing your family? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more authentic stories about finding your own path. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message, share it with them. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that you deserve to be loved exactly as you are, without conditions or expectations. Music.